As always, we start having these conversations before we get on the air, and they're some of the best conversations before because we just start talking about, well, okay, this is what we're going to talk about in the show, and next thing you know, I'm like, man, this is really good. We need to be talking about this on the
Hmm.
air. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host Alan Ulrich here with Bob Rose, and you know, I want to talk about the Saints, and I want to talk about the Rickey Jackson and Cam Jordan and all the things that were good this weekend. But last night, of course, the football world came to a stop, and it really was a shame because you had two great games earlier that day: the Cotton Bowl and the Rose Bowl. Penn State, Franco Harris. They all came out in the Franco
Hmm.
Harris jerseys. Two good bowl games, and here comes this football game. We're all talking about, this is going to be a great matchup, and then, Hamlin, the scary incident with Hamlin happens, and um, I know most people have seen this by now. His vitals are stabilized. He has a
Hmm.
tube on his throat, but he's not on a ventilator. I mean, he just they're checking him. But it was a scary moment. I've watched football for a long, long time. I told you guys all this many, many times, and I've seen some horrible things happen in the football field. I've never seen a player stand up and then do essentially, this is aging myself, but like the Nestea plunge, just basically fall backwards like a dead man.
Yeah.
Didn't even attempt to catch himself. I've never seen that happen in the field. And like I told you before we got started, the thing that got me was the first things I thought of were, Dennis Bird from the Jets, Utley from the Lions, all the, even Darryl Stingley from back in the 70s when Jack Tatum hitting, all the paralysis things. And that was the first thing that popped in my mind was paralysis. Um, and then the fact that they had to perform CPR and they had to use a defibrillator on him. When I saw the replay of that hit, I told my wife, I'm like, yeah, that was like a fastball to the chest. That shoulder hitting Hamlin dead center in the chest and throwing his heart out of rhythm and sending him into cardiac arrest. It was stunning. It was stunning. And when the ambulance came out, I'm like, yeah, this is not. How do you play a game after that? You can't. Um, but Bob, what were your thoughts when you saw this?
Um, I was out in the kitchen making something to eat, and I had the game on in the living room. Which if you folks that have watched the show, occasionally I'll walk around, so it's a short walk. And I kept stepping back and forth, and I saw a player down on the field, and I knew it was a Bills player because I could tell by the white pants,
Mhm.
and I knew it was relatively serious, like you said, because the players were gathered around and everything like that. Yeah, and then they showed the replay of the hit, and they only, to ESPN and ABC's credit, they only showed it once. They showed the replay of the occurrence, and when he first went down, I thought to myself, oh yeah, it's a shoulder. Maybe he broke an arm, because of the awkward way that he fell. And then I watched him get back up and fall the way he did, and yeah, I thought the same thing that you said. Oh my God. And that's all I could, even in my brain, that's all I could get out was, oh my God. And
Mhm.
folks, if CPR has to be administered, that means a person is dying or dead. That's how serious this situation was and is, because I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, yeah, the update, yeah, he's not completely off the ventilator, he's not completely breathing on his own, but it's trending that direction, and they stabilized him. So thank goodness for that. Yeah, prayers for Damar Hamlin and his family. Yeah, that kid, 24 years old, he grew up about 8 miles from where I live right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, one of the better high school football players in Pennsylvania history, and he really used football to get himself out of a bad situation. Two of his friends that he often hung out with were shot and killed when he was a teenager. It was that kind of violence that he grew up around. But to his credit, he used football to rise above that. But he's more than a football player. He's a human being, which a lot of us forget about. When we're rooting for teams or against teams, and some of the land, I'm guilty of it too. Some of the language and ill wishes that we use, and I know I tweeted something cryptic out about the NFL and their delayed reaction and postponing the game, and I'm not taking that back because I do think that I don't think the NFL would have proceeded anyway. And realistically, the teams and the coaches, they weren't leaving them any choice. They had exited the field after the referees had said, all right, you have the typical 5 minutes to warm up after a serious injury, blah, blah. No, we're leaving. And both Bills and Bengals players just got dressed and were exiting the locker room, exiting the stadium. So I give props to them because like you said, Alan, I don't know how any of them could have been expected to go on. I'm going to be watching both of these teams very closely this weekend to see how they proceed from here. Because again, this is a human life we're talking about. And you and I both know current and former players, and they will all say the same thing. It's a brotherhood. It's a fraternity. These guys are closer to their teammates and opponents than they are to some of their own families, especially during the regular season. So that hits very, very hard on an emotional and mental level. And that's what I kept thinking, all night long. And of course, Lauren got home and I filled her in on the situation. First words out of her mouth were, after, oh my God, was, I love you, little guy, was, Will is never playing football. And you and I are both parents. Any parent out there may have thought the same thing. It's a natural reaction, especially if your parents, it just, your mind goes through a whole gambit of things. And I couldn't turn away because I kept praying, literally praying, that this young man would be okay.
Yeah. Chuck Hughes in 1971 was a Detroit Lions receiver, and he is the only NFL player to ever die on the field. And he had a heart attack during the game. Had ran a pass route and was jogging back to the huddle, and he just collapsed right there on the field. And they came out and tried to perform CPR on him and tried to do some things for him and basically rushed him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. But the game did go on. And I'm telling you this story because also in 1963, there was a decision that had to be made about after John F. Kennedy was killed, whether to play a game or not, the games or not. The AFL did not, the NFL did. So
9/11, the same kind of situation was faced by Tagliabue.
Yeah, 9/11, they did take a week off and then they came back, and of course the Saints had to go to New York of all places to play. So big surprise, we lost that game. But, so these incidents like this are not unprecedented. This game, and I know Skip Bayless got dragged on it, and Skip is who he is. And had it not been Skip Bayless and had it been phrased better, I could agree with what he was saying. This is an important game. This has to do that game last night. Human life aside, okay, I'm just talking about the game itself, okay? That was an important game because that's going to determine seeding in the playoffs.
The number 1 seed, no less.
Yes. Imagine if you are a team fighting for a playoff spot, and this game depends on that. Or you are in this game fighting for a playoff spot, and this game depends on that. So the NFL can't just say, well, you know what, we're just going to call this a tie or just vacate the game and they'll just have one less game than everybody else. Well, you can't do that because you've just given the Chiefs the number one seed. And you can't wipe out a Chiefs game. So it's like I applaud the NFL for not only, well, I know the coaches were the ones, coaches and the players were really told the NFL, we're not playing this game.
Yeah.
The NFL is trying to say, no, we told them they didn't have to play this game too, but regardless, they're not playing the game this week. This game has to be resolved somehow because there are so many important implications to it. And you're right. I want to see how these two teams come out this week. Players can allegedly compartmentalize so many things. Can they compartmentalize? I think they can,
right?
Only from the standpoint of he didn't die. He's doing better. In fact, I expect the Bills all to have a number 3 on their helmets this week. And I expect maybe the entire league has a blue and white number 3 on their helmets this week. And there'll be tributes and things like that all for all the games across the league. But how do the Bengals and the Bills play this game again? And when do they play this game? I mean, do you play this after the season? What do you do?
See, Alan, that's where I'll disagree with you because I don't think they do. I don't think you can.
Okay.
And here's why. It is. It schematically is a mess. Whether you do try to fit it in some way, somehow, or whether you don't. And then essentially, like you said, hand the Chiefs over the number 1 seed. But again, this is human life, which transcends any competition of any kind. If the NFL is serious about player health, which includes well-being in this case, emotional well-being.
You know how I feel about the NFL and player health. So.
I know. That's why I said if with a little bit of a smirk, because what are your choices? Play it this week. While they're still dealing with all this, by the way, and then have them turn around and play a game again on Sunday, play it the following week, right after they played and before, one of these teams are guaranteed to have to play in the wild card round. So you're facing the same kind of situation, a shortened week. That's why I don't think you can. I think the only one of two viable solutions is pretend the game never got played, and in the standings, each team has one less game played, or rule the game as a tie, where each team gets equally. And this is such poor wording, so forgive me. Each team gets equally hurt and helped. By the tie. Again, still giving the Chiefs the advantage. I'm pretty sure. I don't have a calculator in front of me. But it's schematically and for the well-being of all those involved, I think that these are the only two plausible solutions, unless you take the playoffs and you move everything back a week and eliminate the week off between the championship games and the Super Bowl. But again, that creates a whole other kind of schematic issue. Maybe not as severe because playoff tickets or playoff matchups aren't set yet. So perhaps that's a solution too. But you can't play this game this week or next week. You can't.
And I know some are probably saying, you heartless bastard. But I'm not. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to explain the logistical problems beyond the issues with the player. Unfortunately, Hamlin, like I said from the outset, is doing better. He's not out of the woods yet. He's still in critical condition, but he is doing better. Okay. It's just even though it's a 17-game season, this is why I smirk whenever I hear about, the NFL caring about player safety. I mean, Thursday Night Football, 17-week season, 1 bye week. You're flying to Europe. You're flying to Mexico. You're flying. They got games. They're trying to play games everywhere, to expand the league and market the league. And, it's a joke. The player safety stuff for me is a joke with the NFL because they're only concerned about player safety if they can make a buck.
Yeah.
Okay. So the cynical person in me is saying, yeah, they're going to play this game because they got to. This is money. They got to sell the tickets. People playing fantasy football,
Uh-huh.
gamblers, all this crap. Um, but the the 30,000 foot up level of discussion I'm having about this is you've got playoff seeding. There's no time left in the league to make up this game by 5 weeks and things like that. This is the last week of the season. So,
Right.
and Anna said they're going to play a Monday night. Well, they got to play this week too. So they can't play Sunday and Monday. It doesn't work that way. So you're going to have to, if you're going to count this game, if you're going to have to make up this game, then you've got to go and juggle the schedule around. And then my question is, okay, do you pick up where you left off? But Cincinnati up 7, you know, how do you do that too? I mean, that's the part.
I think you do. Yeah. If you if you do play the game, I do think you pick up because it was still early. It was I think 5 minutes left to go in the first quarter, and it was a 7-3 game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think you pick it up. But again, I mean, and I'm talking as a human being here, and I know you are too. Uh,
Mhm.
we're talking humans. We're talking about humans here, not players on a video game or
Mhm.
names on a fantasy board. You can. And this is the problem that I had during COVID. Uh, and yes, I know COVID existed. I did the air quotes because of Goodell's reaction to COVID. Just haphazardly moving a game to Tuesday or
Yeah.
Wednesday, and then having those same teams turn around and play on a Saturday, Sunday, Monday the following week.
Mhm. There's another
It's
good example of the
right.
bug.
Don't tell me that you're interested in player freaking safety when you do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And again, I think the only two viable solutions are just not count the game period, or rule it as a tie. And that still is not beneficial to really very many people at all. But you have to do it to prevent further risk with these human beings that will be on the football field.
Yeah. And we're talking about this is the last I'm going to say about this, but when we're talking about seating too, we're talking about open air stadiums in Buffalo, New York,
Mhm.
Kansas City, or Cincinnati. Okay. Cincinnati is the home of the Freezer Bowl. They don't play in that stadium anymore. That stadium's long gone, Riverfront Stadium. But that was minus 59 degrees below with the wind chill when the San Diego Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals played for the NFC Championship in 1981. Um, Buffalo, we already know what that weather can be like. Okay. So Kansas City they have home, if they would get home field advantage, what an advantage that is as far as weather. Because even if they get snow, they're not going to get the ice planet Hoth conditions that Buffalo gets this time of
No.
year. You know, um, so again, that all goes through my mind. At the same time, I'm worried about this player. I'm also thinking about if I'm a Buffalo fan, I'm gonna be pissed because I'm like, I want those games here. I want
Yep.
these teams to have to come here and try that crap here, especially Cincinnati and Kansas City, which is pass oriented teams that like to throw the ball all over the field, have a lot of speed. If I got snow all over the ground, I pretty much eliminated that speed.
Mhm.
And I've got a quarterback who can run. They have quarterbacks who can run, but not like Josh Allen.
No.
So that again, please don't misunderstand that I'm not being heartless about Hamlin. I'm just thinking about as a fan of my team. I want this game played in my stadium because I want weather to be a factor. So it's just Man, I want to play in front of my home crowd. The Bills Mafia, my God, you know, they throw dildos on the field when they play the Patriots.
Well, I mean, and there's no doubt that home advantage means so much more in the NFL than it does in the NBA, than it does in the NHL,
Mhm.
than it does in Major League Baseball. And it's because of crowd, weather conditions, just overall mentality. But again, I'm purely looking at
Mhm.
what everything that transcends football here.
And I don't disagree with you at all in any
Yeah,
of
right.
I'm only playing the white devil's advocate to borrow a line from Walton Johnson, you know. Um, but yeah, that's exactly. I just wanted to throw that out there because it's that's the kind of conversation that sounds insensitive when you tweet it,
Hmm.
but when you have a discussion in person about it, it is effective because it is something that the league is going to be wrestling with, and
Hmm.
I don't see I don't see an easy solution out of
Yeah.
this at all. So, yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you, Ryan. I totally agree with you. Yeah, especially Buffalo's lost 4 consecutive Super Bowls. If you say wide right in Buffalo, that's like saying no call in New Orleans. You're going to get a
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, and I have several friends who are Buffalo fans, and wide right gets them, but you know what gets them more? Music City Miracle. They
Hmm.
will give you a 30-minute lecture about how that was a lateral using physics, of course,
Yeah.
Buffalo physics, but they will use physics. And yeah, I feel for Buffalo because they're a small market, just like New Orleans.
Hmm.
So I totally get it. Um, but yeah, and I see you and Jerry talking about this. I just do not like Thursday night football. I like Thanksgiving Day football,
Yeah.
but I do not like Thursday night football every week. I just think that's not a good thing for player health. It just really isn't. And if they want to, in 17 game schedule, if they want to go to 18 games, which is what they're pushing for,
Oh yeah.
you better put 2 buys in there.
Yeah.
You need to have at least 2 buys in there because we've already seen with Saints health, and we can go ahead and move into the Eagles game. Um, the Eagles here, they're the number 1 seed potentially. They still haven't locked that up yet, thanks to losing to us. But we saw in that game they didn't have their quarterback. They didn't have their starting right tackle, I think,
Yeah.
Johnson, who
Yeah.
is probably their best tackle, and Cam Jordan destroyed their replacement. And then Josh Sweat, one of their best pass rushers, even though they got 7 sacks from the Saints total, um, uh, got knocked out early in the game,
Mhm.
and we don't know. I don't know if he's going to be cut back for the playoffs or not. If they don't get the bye, he won't be.
Right.
Uh,
Not to mention Avonte Maddox and C.J. Gardner Johnson. They're 2 slot corners out
mhm,
still.
yeah. So they could be one and done in the playoffs. Um, Imagine winning 13 or more games and losing in the first round.
We
Or
don't
have
have to
in the
imagine it.
wild
We've
card
seen
round.
it.
Yeah, you're right about that. We have seen that, but because of injuries.
Right.
Um, yeah, Calvin, I've always been in favor of expanding the roster too. The
I mean, you already have the players with the practice squad.
Mhm.
Just allow more game day actives. That's all. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Um, By the way, I'm sure someone's asking what games are back there I'm playing. I played anniversary games. Okay, so 32 years ago, New Year's Eve was the Saints Rams game from 1990 that the kicked the Saints in the playoffs at 8-8. That's when they finally hit 500. And then 22 years ago, uh, New Year's Eve is the game that's coming on right now, the playoff game between the Rams and the Saints. Where Willie Jackson had himself a game. Oh, it's my favorite. The guy they just showed just now is my favorite costume I ever saw anybody wear in the Superdome. He was painted as a devil with icicles on him. because hell froze over. The Saints won a playoff game. So that is just those are two games. And I must have watched that playoff game between the Saints and the Rams. I recorded it on VHS tape. That's how long ago that was. Recorded on VHS tape, and I watched it so many times. I could probably do Al Michaels play-by-play commentary by heart. Um, just it was so much fun to watch that game. So, um, but yeah, so I'm throwing those on there. I know we're playing the Panthers this week, but those are memorable games. Those are games I always have to remember to throw up every New Year's Eve.
Yep. And Ryan, you're absolutely right. The NFL doesn't give a shit about extending the season. They want the season extended. It wouldn't surprise me. If they expand to 18 games, you'll either see you'll probably see another playoff team added to each conference with 2 bye weeks again, or don't be surprised if they have an extra bye week in the playoffs. That kind of thing, especially after an occurrence like this. We're sitting here talking about potential solutions if they have to postpone a game, say COVID comes back, because that's a very real possibility too. Schematically, if there was an extra week between the regular season and the playoffs, conceivably giving a bye team 2 weeks off, that gives you that extra cushion where we wouldn't be talking about the schematic and logistic issues the way we are if they have to move a game or if they have to move a week of games, things like that. I'm not all in favor for it, not at all, but I do think that that's the direction that we're headed.
Last week we didn't even talk about Franco last week, but Franco Harris, that was December 23rd. And that was the division round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
On December 23rd, when that was a 14-game schedule with 6 preseason games. Okay. And the season used to end by December 16th, December 18th, somewhere around there. Okay. You only had one wild card team back then. So it was 4 teams in the playoffs, each division.
Well, even as recently as 22 years ago, the game that you have on, that's a wild card game that was played on New Year's Eve. This New Year's Eve, we're still sitting with 2 weeks left in the regular season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's hard to believe. I mean, my parents got married on January 15th of '67. That was 14th of '67. January 15th of '67 was Super Bowl II. So it's amazing to think about, how much the league is now pushing into February, and I could see this, like Ryan was saying, if you go to 18 games, have 2 byes, delay maybe another week between the playoffs and stuff, you could have football going into March.
Yep. Well, Alan, guess what that does? That opens up, and I know they already tried a Super Bowl in a cold weather open stadium, when the Broncos played the Seahawks, but they were terrified about what the weather would do then. You push it back into March, and trust me, folks, we still get snowstorms up here, but they're a lot fewer and farther between. That opens it up for all of a sudden a Super Bowl to be played in a Buffalo, New York, or a Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's at least stadiums with the capacity that they want, like Heinz Field or whatever the hell they're calling it now. That's too small a capacity. But the larger stadiums, Buffalo, Kansas City, et cetera, that opens them up for a northern Super Bowl.
Yeah, you all these stadiums, that new stadiums are being built because that seems to be the trend now. Let's say, for example, that I don't want to say Denver, although Denver would be interesting because that is downtown. But if Denver were to build a new stadium, I know they built one recently, but if they were to tear that down and build a whole new fancy stadium, I can see a Super Bowl being played in Denver.
Yeah.
If it got into March. Seattle with the rain, they couldn't do that. But San Francisco, Levi Stadium. Um, Las Vegas. I think they are going to play a Super Bowl in Las Vegas.
They are 2024. I think before the Dome hosts their next Super Bowl.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm old fashioned. I was watching the Rose Bowl yesterday. I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking of Super Bowl, 14.
Yep.
Rams versus the Steelers, and that shot of the San Gabriel Mountains at sunset. And they're playing that music with the chime because the Rams are taking the lead, and
Yeah.
the fans are chanting. They think they're going to win, and they're playing that dramatic music, and they show the scoreboards 19-17. It's just I like Super Bowls and the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, I love those
because it's a beautiful stadium from television. I've heard it's a rat hole in real life.
Right.
It's a beautiful stadium on television, the San Gabriel Mountains. It's one of the last stadiums that you still have daylight for most of the game. Sun comes down in the evening, even when they have the 5 o'clock kickoff Pacific time. It's still daylight until halftime at least. Yep. So it's really special. Yeah, we will talk about them too, because the Cotton Bowl was unbelievable. I had Tulane dead and buried about 5 times in that game, and they just kept coming back. I kept looking at him going, okay, this is where Tulane's going to get worn down because he's got more players. And, Tulane kept surprising me. And I'll tell you what, I don't know the players' names off the top of my head, but number 4, who my wife had tutored, he came from Hanville. Number 22 from Ponchatoula. And number 7, the quarterback, really impressed the hell out of me. And I was really watching Caleb Williams kind of scouting,
Yeah.
If the Saints are lucky enough to draft that guy next year, that is a special athlete. He really is. But that was incredible. And the last, 4 minutes of that game, just mind-boggling, the safety, and then to get the ball back and drive down the field. And I think that quarterback, number 7, only threw 7 passes. Holy Super Bowl 8.
He didn't throw a lot. That's for sure.
He reminded me of Taysom Hill, and it's not just because he wore number 7. But he was a big kid just running, and it was strong. So it's just. That was an incredible game. That really was. My youngest graduated from Tulane. So,
and I am so happy for Tulane. I hope that this victory does for them what Boise State's victory on I think it was Fiesta Bowl did a few years back. What Northwestern's appearance in the Rose Bowl did for them for a few years back in the late 90s, and what that did for that program. It's a recruiting tool. Nobody is ever necessarily suggesting that Tulane is going to be on the same level with the SEC year in and year out with the SEC schools, with some of the Big Ten schools, etc. But it can be such a boost for their program. That's why, and I love Penn State's victory in the Rose Bowl. That was big for them. LSU capped off an unexpectedly surprising season, according to what a lot of people were saying. But Tulane's victory means so much more. Probably the only, and I've enjoyed this bowl season, probably the only victory bigger than Tulane's was TCU's, because of the magnitude of what TCU's victory is. And I hope that builds their program as well. That's what this kind of victory can do for a college like Tulane.
A little bit, because my son, speaking of TCU, my son threw this. I don't know if he's still in the room or not watching, but let's see, where was it? Yeah. Apparently the Panthers are making a push to lure Jim Harbaugh.
Oh, Matt, everybody is. Denver is. Harbaugh is going to be almost as big a name, maybe as big a name as Sean Payton. And
Well,
I don't give a crap what Harbaugh said last year. After staying at Michigan, if the right team or the right dollar signs come a calling, Harbaugh is back in the NFL. No question in my mind.
Well, he better learn better clock management than what he did at the end of that game.
Right.
Because I was all for Harbaugh, and I'm like, yeah, I always like that guy, and I think he's a good coach and everything else. And okay, I just want to make sure you were still here, Matt. But yeah, that clock management was just pathetic. I just couldn't believe what he was just letting seconds just tick away. And yeah, you got, you still have your 3 timeouts in your back pocket. You can force the punt and, maybe get something. But by the time you got the ball back, there was no time left.
Yeah. My favorite was when they panned up to the stands and his dad, the coach, was yelling, "Call timeout." Why aren't you calling timeout?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That Matt just said the same thing. His dad's screaming. I'm going, call friggin' timeout. You've got to save time. You can clock it, but yeah, he just let it go. And I'm going, you're not going to win. You're going to run out of time.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I was thrilled to see it because I hate everything Michigan related. Always have. Always have.
I just, when I'm watching the game, that kind of stuff just blows my mind when I'm not even for anybody. I'm just watching the game and I'm going, he is just letting this clock run. And, when he finally started calling timeouts with under a minute left, I'm going, it's too late now.
Yep.
I get it. A field goal will win this game. But unless you get a great return, you're not going to get in field goal range, and you're certainly not going to get down the field fast enough. It's just not. And then, Alabama goes and destroys. I just drew a blank on
Kansas State.
Kansas State, who beat TCU somehow.
No, I forgot. In the Big 12 champion, you're right.
Yes, they did. And then Ohio State got beaten by Georgia, which that was a great game.
Yeah.
I was sorry to see Ohio State lose one of those games you really didn't want anybody to lose, because that was definitely a game where Ohio State didn't lose. They just ran out of time.
Yeah.
Because those were two powerful teams going at each other, throwing some serious haymakers. And if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't get hurt, I think Ohio State probably pulls that game out, which would have been a hell of an upset. And I kept saying, I said, I kind of want Ohio State to win, but I don't want to see Ohio State, Michigan, because I assumed Michigan was going to beat.
Same. TCU. I've been rooting for I've been a relatively open TCU fan all year, and I was always a fan of Gary Patterson before that. But I was the same. I expected Michigan to beat them by probably a couple of scores. And TCU is another plucky team, but I didn't think they had enough forces to pull it off.
Yeah, you're right, Calvin. Same with Jameson Williams in Alabama last year. Georgia did get very lucky. And, I don't know. And I promise you, we're going to get to the Eagles soon, too. It's a lot of football this weekend, a lot of football. I'm more surprised that Marvin Harrison Jr. is playing. And I get surprised when I can remember guys getting drafted, and their kids now are playing, and I can remember watching the draft when those guys, I'll have to do that. I'll have to check that out. But it was still a great football weekend, despite what happened Monday night. It was enjoyable college football, and I usually complain about the bowl games because I find a lot of them boring.
Same.
Because the hype never lives up to the actual game. Too many games are one-sided affairs, especially, when you're talking about, like an LSU Purdue kind of game where the coach is already gone. A lot of the players are checking out because they want to
Yep.
play in the NFL, and it becomes like this horrible 80s Super Bowl kind of game.
Yeah.
It just really is. So, um, yeah, Jerry Rice got drafted when I was a senior in high school, so it's not quite the same as Marvin Harrison, I guess, and Terrell Owens talking about coming back at age 49. Um, and I shared, they said, who's ever done that? And I said, well, Al Davis really did call Howie Long 5 years after he
He did.
retired and tried to get him to come back. He was already Hall of Fame. He was already in the Hall of Fame. And Howie Long thought about it because I think Howie Long was 35, maybe 37 years old at the time because he retired because of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought about it for half a second. Then I shared a story, a Sports Illustrated cover. Again, speaking of Franco Harris, Jim Brown was angry that Franco Harris was getting close to his rushing yardage total, and he kept running out of bounds to avoid the hits later in his career. So Jim Brown seriously thought about coming back in the NFL at age 47.
Yep.
He didn't do it, obviously, but that was the big Sports Illustrated issue. He's going to be a Raider because where else would he go but the Raiders?
Right.
So yeah, you've had these players kind of entertain that thought, and of course Joe Theismann has always talked about wanting to have that comeback, because he felt like his career was cut short by Lawrence Taylor. But sometimes I wish Theismann would have gone back instead of being in the announcer's booth. But that's another story all by itself. Let's talk about the Saints, though. 42 minutes into the show, about the Saints. Was that first 28 or 25 minutes of the first half of the Eagles game some of the best Saints football you have seen this season?
Yeah, no doubt. I love the way, the defense was just tremendous throughout. This defense has been championship level for the last 6 or 8 weeks. But the offense, I was really impressed at the offensive game plan because they kept a very good Philadelphia defense on their heels throughout the entire first half. What worried me at halftime was that they had squandered a couple of scoring opportunities, the interception in the red zone, yes, but also a sack to take them out of potential field goal range, and another sack that turned a possible touchdown drive into a field goal. So I was worried at halftime about all that. And then to watch them just go into an ultra conservative offensive shell in the second half just drove me bananas. But yeah, the first half was you got to believe, outside of maybe the Raiders shutout, but this was such a higher caliber opponent. That when you take that into consideration, that I agree, this was the best half of Saints football we've seen, really since the beginning of 2021, since the beginning of last year.
Absolutely. I thought that too. I loved everything about this game plan. I was excited that they were staying ahead of them chains. They went for it on fourth down a couple times with Taysom Hill running the ball. It was like he's watched all the podcasts. He's read all the accounts. Yeah, run Taysom. I just, the only negative of that first half was, and it was a turning point in the game, and if we would have lost that game, I would have pointed to that play when Andy Dalton threw that interception. I was incredibly frustrated with him because I get it. Keith Kirkwood has dropped every pass you've thrown him, but Keith Kirkwood is wide open in the end zone. They went after Olave, and it was one of those passes, and I saw it again against Tulane at USC. Caleb Williams made the same mistake. You thought you could drop it in the bucket just beyond the cornerback into the receiver's hands. And the ball didn't have enough air under it. And from that point on, it was like, okay, we're taking the air out the ball. You're not going to put the ball up for grabs anymore. We're not going to let you turn the ball over. And unfortunately, Philadelphia had the momentum.
Yeah.
They scored on that first possession of the second half, and they they really earned a touchdown. I know Moose Johnson was losing his shit about the holding call, and I'm like, yeah, he really called out the wrong number. That guy wasn't holding. You're right, but the guy next to him was.
Right. That's what I was saying too.
Um, but yeah, Moose Johnson's losing his shit over that because Philadelphia's just not playing the way they're supposed to play, and it helped tremendously. You had Gardner Minshew in there because he is a statue compared to Jalen Hurts. So you're able to go in there and sack him. You know where he's going to be, and you want him throwing the ball. Cam Jordan destroyed that backup tackle to get 3 sacks. But, one of those touchdown drives you were talking about where they had to settle for the field goal on 3rd and 2 from the 2-yard line, poor Landon Young got blown up.
Yeah.
And it was a play that was designed to go right there, right behind Young. And I think Penning was right next to him. I think he was supposed to go right behind those two for the touchdown. And when Young got blown up, now Taysom had to go wider, which allowed the defense to just because they're fast to stretch the play out and tackle him for no gain. I understand going for the field goal, but at the same time, because points at a premium, at the same time, I wish they could have pushed that ball in there. I really do. I just think if you had your starting offensive line, if you had Ruiz, you had McCoy, you had Pete, you probably push it inside on that defense. But yeah, you're right, Calvin. They have zero aggression on offense. They play very, very carefully, very close to the vest. Unless they're having a lot of success, then they try something strange like a very slow developed flea flicker with only one receiver. And surprise, they don't go for it. So then you have to eat the ball because you've got no other outlet to go to. It's just that was bizarre too, because I've seen Sean Payton call flea flickers before, and Drew Brees having to check it down because the guy is not open. There was no check down option. So, they still are having trouble conceptualizing the right formations and the right times to call certain plays. And that's been Carmichael's weakness since he's been offensive coordinator without Payton.
No doubt about it. And that's why I think, look, Saints fans, you can hate me or not. I don't care. Dennis Allen's going to be back. But I would bet a paycheck that Pete Carmichael is not. Or if he is, he's kicked up to a title position like senior offensive consultant or something like that. But they will have definitely a new offensive coordinator, probably an almost entirely new offensive staff. But remember, the offensive coordinator calls the plays, but the head coach makes these decisions. And therefore, I think the infuriatingly conservative offense is just as much an indictment on Dennis Allen as it is Pete Carmichael and the offensive play calling. So while Allen will be back, I do think that there is going to be some serious talking tos from Loomis and ownership about these are we want you back. You're welcome to stay. But these are changes that we want, both in your style and on your staff. I think that those are going to be the edicts thrown at him this offseason.
I think so too. And I think he will be the kind of he's going to reshuffle his offensive staff. Carmichael, I do think, is gone. My dark horse for offensive coordinator is Cody Burns, the receivers.
Same. Coach. I think that's why they brought him in.
Yeah. Because he didn't want he was interviewing other people for offensive coordinator last year because Carmichael really didn't want it. So Carmichael ended up taking it because he couldn't find a better alternative. But I think what we saw in the Eagles game is a preview of the kind of offense that he wants to run, a run first power game with a quarterback. Once they start loading the box up is now playing against a zone defense and picking it apart. Um, I think Andy Dalton's back, but I do think they try and bring somebody else in too. But Andy Dalton's their fallback option, whether
Agreed.
that's the draft or in free agency or a trade or some kind. I think the fact that Jameis Winston's not playing again this Sunday, the handwriting has been on the wall since about week 8,
Yeah.
if not earlier, and some fans still refuse to see it. Winston is going to be designated a June 1st cut and will be gone the first week of the calendar year. He is not in the Saints' plans in the future. They're not going to trade him; they're just going to release him.
Mm-hmm.
And you just got to deal with it. And even if Allen, for some reason, isn't going to go, which I know he's not because you won 3 in a row, very likely win 4 in a row. Because I do think Carolina, although they're going to put up a good fight, Carolina does have their bags packed. They're the only reason why they played as hard as they did against Tampa Bay was because they thought they had a shot
Mm-hmm.
at making the playoffs. Now that that's over with, they don't have the same culture as the Saints do. The
Right.
Saints have come out there to finish strong. They're going to want to finish 4 in a row, winning 4 in a row. I don't think Carolina does. That doesn't mean I don't think the game is going to be a blowout or anything like that. I just think that um, the Saints are going to be able to do what they want to do to Carolina. Um, but there was something I wanted to throw up there too. Matthew Stanford uh, in on the Under the Dome Facebook page. Let me pull this up real quick. I want to make sure I read all these stats right. Talking about how good Dennis Allen's defense past, um, I guess 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. I want to probably going back to the Rams game, if not earlier. Pull this stat up and I can't get it.
Well, I mean, while you're
I want to
pulling
get.
that up, I do have some stats that'll make you. Did you get it?
Yeah, I've got it now.
Okay.
Since week 8, the Saints are 5-4, ranking third in the NFL in points allowed, 15 per game. First in
Mm-hmm.
yards allowed per play, 4.66. Seventh in yards allowed per game, 307.3. And first in passing yards allowed per game,
Mm-hmm.
175.7. So, I mean, and you still haven't had an entire healthy defense, if you
No.
think about it. They haven't all been out there together. The closest you had was probably last week when Lattimore came out, but you still don't have Marcus May out there. And you
Mm-hmm.
probably won't have him this week either. So,
And how
those are
pathetic
the
is
kind of
that you threw out those defensive stats, and I knew most of them. Uh,
yeah.
they still only have a record of 5-4 during those games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
But yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, the thing that I kept saying during the Eagles game, what is this thing? We can't break 20 points per game. We cannot get, if we got 20 points, we're going to win this game.
Right.
And thank God Lattimore got the pick 6 because the offense couldn't do it. And that's really, hey, we're going back to what we was talking about calling the right plays, when to call them, not being in the shell, being more aggressive in offense. Um, you if you can just average 24 points a game, this team should win almost every game it plays if the
Yep.
defense can keep playing the way it's played since week 8. I mean,
Yep.
and I think is that the Raiders game, week 8? I think so.
That's about then. Yeah.
Could be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, Raiders game. So yeah, I mean, if you could just get 24 points a game, You are winning in this league. And I think that's why Dennis Allen's going to look for a new quarterback. I think that's
Mhm.
why Dennis Allen wants to get the power running back. Probably wants three running backs, three counting Alvin Kamara. That he can just alternate in there and run them fresh, and then throw Taysom Hill in there too.
And I'm not necessarily against that as long as you don't forget that you have wide receivers like a
Mhm.
developing Rashid Shaheed,
Yeah.
and Chris Olave. In other words, and you've mentioned this multiple times this year. In other words, when you have a team on the ropes, when you have your foot on their throat, you
Hmm.
finish the job. And that's where Dennis Allen has lacked severely this year. Uh,
Absolutely.
you've talked about these defenses multiple times. I've talked about them, with other people too. The 1990, 91, 92 Saints, both personnel wise and statistically, these were the best defenses in franchise history. Would have been considered among the best of all time had they won even one championship.
Oh yeah.
those
Well,
those defenses, 90, 91 and 92, there was a stretch where they gave up six straight games were under 20 points. This current Saints team, 2022 Saints, they're sitting at a streak of five straight games of under 20 points. Seven straight opponents 20 or less, with the only exception being the Ravens scoring 27 points. That is a damn good defense. And they're doing it without getting turnovers. They're just stuffing people old school.
hmm absolutely, absolutely. That's why we can point to about a handful of plays, um, where if this happens or that happens or this doesn't happen, that the Saints probably win. Even the shutout against the 49ers,
Oh yeah.
Mara doesn't fumble the ball. That pass counts. That Olave got. The pass that hits, I think, is different points. Oh, great. Okay. You hold the 49ers to 13 points, in their stadium. That is an incredible game. Um,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, but that was Sean Payton's approach. Sometimes Sean Payton was too aggressive, but
Yep.
yeah, you need to finish the game. You need to go. I hate to say it, but go Mortal Kombat, finish him. Yeah, I mean, you do. Um,
Well, their inability to finish. Well, the referees also did this, against Minnesota, but their
yeah.
inability to finish cost them losses. Minnesota, Cincinnati,
Hmm.
Tampa Bay,
Yep.
almost cost them against Seattle.
Yeah. Almost cost
Uh, eh,
Cleveland and Philadelphia too.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I will agree with people that are saying, this team is what, 7-9 right now. They could very easily be 10-6, maybe 11-5. They could also just as easily be 5-11 coming into this game because of that mentality.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that was the problem with Bum Phillips's teams. That was the problem with Jim Mora's teams. Why did Jim Mora go 3-9 against the 49ers? Well, because he lacked the aggression or the ability to finish a team off. He always let me that the 1990 season, I just had it up a little bit ago. That 49ers game, opening day, John Forte on Monday Night Football. That defense is destroying the 49ers. That defense is killing Joe Montana. But you only had a 12-7 lead or 12-6 lead. And uh, you let Montana hang around and hang around. Suddenly he's driving down the field. I think they got it to 12-9, and then something to that effect. Maybe
Hmm.
the final score was 13-12. I have to go back
Yeah.
and look at what happened. I think it was a field goal that won the game. It was 12-10. 12-10. That's what it was. They got it to 12-10, and yeah, they got it. All they had to do was go down the field and get a field goal because the Saints could not pick up a first down. Speaking of the Rams, 1983, Saints Rams. Bum Phillips doesn't go for a long field goal with Morton Anderson. Granted, Anderson, this is only his second year in the league.
Right.
He's not the Great Dane yet. Um, but he passes up, I think it was a 51-yard field goal or 47-yard field goal by Anderson, chooses to punt, pin the Rams inside the 5, let my defense win a game 26-24. What happens? Vince Ferragamo gets hot, starts connecting. They get in field goal range. Mike Lansford kicks that field goal, kicks the Saints out of the playoffs and a winning record. Rams go instead. Good news is the Rams get skull dragged by the Washington Redskins in RFK Stadium. I think it was 40-3. They beat the crap out of them. So that was the good news. That's the happy ending of that story.
Listen, we're talking about defense here, and the old man. This old man is tired, so I'd like to wrap it up. But one thing I want to ask you is, since we're talking about defense, and he just broke a record on the Jordy Hultberg show. I was talking about the Mount Rushmore of Saints players. Let's leave coaches out of it. Drew Brees undoubtedly on it. Willie Roaf, same. Rickey Jackson. For that fourth person, you could make a convincing argument for, obviously, Sam Mills, who's about to go in the Hall, Pat Swilling, who should be, maybe a Marcus Colston, and Cam Jordan. Does Cam Jordan? I know you're going to agree that he belongs in the conversation. Is Cam Jordan that fourth player on that Saints Mount Rushmore?
You could also throw Morton Anderson and Archie Manning.
Sure. Jari Evans. Yeah, there's a couple more.
Yeah, Jari Evans is another one that's going to be Hall of Fame eligible. It's amazing. If you'd asked me this question 20 years ago, I probably, Wayne Martin, and I have those kind of players in there. But now you actually have legitimate Hall of Famers. And I think Cam Jordan, and again, this goes back to why the no call pisses me off so much, because it changed so many things. I think Cam Jordan's a Hall of Famer shoe-in with Super Bowl ring. Okay, without a Super Bowl ring, you can play that but game all day long.
Right.
The man just passed Rickey Jackson, and I wrote in my Good, Bad, and Ugly trying to compare the two for as an all-time sack leader, and he's still got a game to go. And he is going to probably put Sam Darnold on his ass at least 3 times to really extend that lead against Jackson. Jackson missed 2 games, because of the broken cheekbone, and he came back with the face mask. Cam Jordan's only missed 2 games, and only 1 because of injury, and he didn't want to miss that game either.
Yeah.
So the testament of his durability, the impact he has on the game as a defensive end, playing as long as he has and still getting sacks. I think he has 8.5 this year.
Yep.
He could go into double-digit sacks, and he's now in his 30s.
He can, and if he does, Rickey Jackson holds the franchise record for 7 straight seasons with double-digit sack totals. So Cam would break that tie, or 6 straight. So Cam would break that tie.
Yep. And granted, Rickey Jackson's first 8 sacks don't count because he had it in his rookie year and it's not an official stat. Regardless, I count them, but I'm going to also count Rickey. I'm also going to count Cam Jordan. And Jordan is right there with him. And if this is what Jackson had to go to San Francisco to get a Super Bowl ring, because he wasn't going to get it with the Saints, unfortunately. Cam Jordan needs to retire as a Saint. And Cam Jordan deserves that Super Bowl ring. And he's probably not going to get it in New Orleans because we missed our opportunity. That window closed when Drew Brees retired. And then Sean Payton walked away. But I do have him in that conversation for the Mount Rushmore. In fact, I probably have him in there. It's tough. It's hard to knock Rickey Jackson off because Rickey Jackson was the face of this franchise throughout the 80s and into the 90s. Willie Roaf came in right behind him. Yep. Cam Jordan to me is, because you had a Drew Brees on this team, he couldn't be the face of the franchise, but he was definitely the inspiration of that defense. He played on some terrible defenses, historically bad defenses, and was still out there hustling, making plays, doing the thing, getting the sacks,
Yeah.
making
I mean, I remember it ended up being a 51-45 Saints victory over the Detroit Lions, where the Saints defense was improving.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just one of those days reminiscent of 2014, 15, 16. But yeah, just like those, anytime the Saints won a shootout in those years, it was always a defensive play that usually caused it. And it was always a Cam Jordan batted pass, a Cam Jordan sack, or a Cam Jordan run stuff for loss. And I think that's what makes Cam so special. You can look at Bruce Smith is a great example. Bruce Smith is one of the greatest defensive ends to have ever played. But in his latter years, they only used Bruce on passing situations. Kevin Green only effective in passing situations. We can go on and on and on. Cam Jordan was a legitimate every down player in a passing era of situational pass rushers and everything else. He took just as much pride in stopping the run as he did putting a quarterback on his back.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Detroit game in 2017. I would put that in. I would run that as part of Cam's highlights because he had like 8 batted balls in that game. And he had a sack. He had a recovery of a sack fumble, scored a touchdown, and then did the whole goalpost dunk after it. I mean, it was that was a masterpiece by Cam. And absolutely. I mean, I am so happy if for a player like him to pass Rickey Jackson. If you're going to pass Rickey Jackson, you better be a favorite. Somebody that the city is proud of to represent the team, and he was. I mean, he really is. No, John, I have not gotten any new news on Sean. I meant to reach out over the holidays, and I just never did. I will have new information, hopefully for the next show. I'll reach out to his son again, but I have nothing new on that. Last thing, Panthers, Saints, final game of the season. How do you see this game playing out?
I agree with what you said earlier. The Panthers have been a really game football team for the last month. Under Steve Wilks, after trading Christian McCaffrey and Robbie Anderson, quarterback turnstile. But the Panthers are also used to being in this situation where their last game means nothing. And that does affect the player's mentality when it happens for multiple years in a row, where you just you sit here and you say, oh, God, here we go again. There's no such thing as a meaningless game to a competitor. Anybody that says that this game or that game is meaningless, you've never played sports or you've sucked at it if you did. But yeah, the pride is a great motivator. The Saints would love to extract even a small measure of revenge for the defeat at the Panthers' hands week 3. This team still playing for some job security. Some of them, Demario Davis, Cam, they're going to be rumored to be cap cuts. It gets a hell of a lot harder to cut a guy. Even for salary cap reasons, if they're still playing really strong at 34 years old. The safeties, Tyrann Mathieu, Marcus May, if he plays, guys like that, rookies that are on a roll, Alontae Taylor, Shaheed, et cetera. These guys are going to want to go into the offseason with momentum. Does that mean that ending a year strong means you're going to start the following year strong? No, of course not. But it means a lot to these guys. It makes them more attractive as a potential free agent destination when you don't have a lot of cash to throw around this offseason. It's little things like that records. Olave could pass. Yeah, he needs a great game to do it, but Olave could set the new receiving record for a rookie. Kamara could break the rushing touchdowns record. It's the little things like that that are going to want to motivate this team, and they're playing like they're on a roll. So I do think that that's going to mean something. It's going to mean something to do it in front of their home fans. It wouldn't surprise me if the Saints won this game by 3 scores. We might see a 30-point game just because they get themselves on a roll. Marshawn is back and looking like he's playing well. It's just going to be those kind of things. And, on paper, I think the talent is just going to overmatch Carolina on Sunday.
My big thing is they have to shut down any kind of hope that the Carolina Panthers can run the football, not let them hang around. You've got to force turnovers. You've got to go ahead and make all the impact plays. Caden Ellis, again, great plays out of this man. I'd like to see even more. He's fighting for a contract. So I know DeMario Davis wants to go out well. I know Cam Jordan wants to get some more sacks. He wants 3 sacks. The whole key is, though, that run defense has to be good and have an impact on the game, shut them down. I like what I saw of Eno Benjamin, the little bit that he was out there. I did like a little of that, and I'd like to see him do a little bit more. I'm glad to see they did the same play again with Kamara basically going in the Wildcat and Taysom Hill, the quarterback, is the lead blocker, but it works because Taysom Hill is that kind of player. Giving the ball to the fullback, Adam Prentice, in short yardage, running old school football with 9 offensive linemen on the
I love that. It didn't work, but I loved it.
I thought it was hilarious out there. They're counting them. I mean, it's like, we're going to run the ball down your throat, and there's nothing you can do about it. We can put 9 guys in there because we're going to let our quarterback run the ball.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot to see, and I am concerned about the fact that Ramczyk went out with a bad hip. I'm going to watch that injury report to see if he comes back.
I'd be surprised, and at this point, again, nobody is saying tanking, but I would love to see Trevor Penning get a start, and work him in, because he's the future. So get his feet wet now a little bit with a start, even if it's just to end the regular season.
I like to see him at right tackle too, because I think the power running game, he fits that well. He's not going to have to deal with the best pass rusher, and I think that'll help him a lot. Mm-hmm. It'll be a lot of running the ball. So, I want to see that. And I think they win this game, too. I don't know if they're going to win by 3 scores, but I think they're going to win this game, and I think it's going to be another great defensive effort by the Saints. They want to finish second in the division. I'm curious to see what happens with Tampa Bay against Atlanta.
Same.
Because they can't do any better than 4th seed, So do you rest your starters? Do you rest Tom Brady? Is this time to play Kyle Trask? Because you don't want to. You got to play the following week. So I'm curious to see what happens here, and it'd be so. Saints fans would still be livid. They're gonna be livid anyway, but livid. Not only Dennis Allen's coming back, but that you were pointing to that. Mark Ingram going out of bounds is the difference between the Saints winning the division and the Saints being in second place with Tampa. Especially Tampa finishes, they lose the game, finish 7-9 or 7-10 or whatever it is. No, they're 8-8 now, so they'd be finished 8-9. 8-9, and both Saints and Tampa both be 8-9. So I don't think you're going to see that. I do think, though, you're going to see a big play from Shaheed.
I do too.
This is again why I like the idea of Cody Burns as the offensive coordinator, because I really credit Cody Burns for not only getting Olave up to speed quickly to overcome the loss of Michael Thomas, but getting Shaheed off the practice squad, undrafted free agent, And he's not just a kick returner, he is an impactful receiver. He
Yep.
was the leading receiver again this week.
Yep.
I mean, this is Marcus Colston kind of stuff right now.
Yeah, it really is. And it answers, I mean, this team, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about this offseason. There are a lot of roster spots that need addressed. Backup running back, defensive tackle, safety, linebacker depth. If you do let a guy like Demario Davis go for cap reasons, wide receiver, and I still expect them to bring in other receivers, but if you can go into the offseason, Olave is your number one. He's your future. Michael Thomas is going to be back because of the money that and the way the contract is structured, but it's also very dangerous to count on him to be a number one or number two because of his recent injury history. So if you can go into your offseason feeling pretty confident that I have myself at number two in Rashid Shaheed, that changes a lot of strategy in how you address that receiver position.
Right. And, what do you do with Deontay Hardy? Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
he's a free agent. You can't re-sign him.
Right. I think Jarvis Landry's gone. So, the Raiders had put 3 jerseys up at 40 or 60% discount, and it was Waller, Jacobs, and Carr's jerseys. And I'm looking at those 3 jerseys going, I take all 3 of them on the Saints right now.
Yeah, right.
Would, especially Waller and Jacobs. I mean, give me those 3. If y'all want to fire Josh McDaniels, we can work out a trade with Sean Payton. We'll take a first-round pick and those 3 players and send them on over to us, and you'll be good. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Hardy was done when Chauncey was done. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, basically. He really would have to beg for a job again for the Saints and not take much money. But yeah, we can talk about in the offseason more about roster turnover and where they need to improve and things like that. But John Butler is going to have a thing come up on his podcast or his little show, Life of a Saint. He's asking people, other hosts of podcasts, I'm one of them, to list the top 10, and you too, Bob, top 10 players of this season. And I picked Chris Olave. I left some of the obvious ones that are down on the list for other people to pick because I want to hear their thoughts on that. Like Rashid Shaheed, like Caden Ellis, some of the players we were talking about.
But I actually picked Caden Ellis for the reason that you just mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. I didn't want to go into Olave. I got to talk about him, but just there's so many gems that we found in this lost season that are good building blocks. And this is the other thing why I think Allen's going to be back. Aside from the defensive performance that we've seen since week 8, aside from the fact that he's managed to win 3 games in a row, possibly 4 games in a row to basically save the season. So we're going to be maybe 1 or 2 games off of Peyton's pace last year. But unlike 2020 and 2021, we look like we've got some building blocks.
Yeah.
When you think about the guys who were counting on going into the season from last year, Marquez Callaway, I'm just trying to think of some of these players, Deontay Hardy.
Yeah.
Guys that we thought were going to, carry this team into 2022, and they really kind of fell off.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Or your constants. Yeah, the people you knew you could always count on. Marshawn Lattimore injured, Michael Thomas injured, Alvin Kamara, I don't know what. Those guys being invisible for one reason or another for all or a large portion of the year.
Well, look, Paulson Adebo. Calvin asked that question earlier. Has Taylor surpassed Adebo as a starter? In my mind, I think he kind of has.
He has, but guess what? Adebo played 100% every defensive snap against Philadelphia. Alontae played none.
Yeah, I know. But to me, I see a lot of future in Taylor. And
Same.
last year, we were counting on Adebo to be that shutdown, two shutdown corners we were
Hmm.
talking about. You know,
Well,
with
and look, you need three quality
Mhm.
corners in today's NFL, and the Saints have more than just three quality. They have three legitimate shutdowns, and Lattimore, who's among the best.
Mhm.
Alontae Taylor. Olave is the easy choice for the team's rookie of the year, but I actually think Alontae Taylor, in his own way, has made
Mhm.
a bigger impact because of who he had to step in for. And then you have a Debo, and we're sitting here talking to Debo, and he's been in a slump. He's come on lately, but he's been in a slump most of the
Yeah.
year.
Well, it's funny because when Taylor was out there replacing Lattimore, they would go at Taylor in the beginning, and then you'd see all the offenses shift and start targeting Adebo and leaving Taylor alone. And to me,
Hmm.
that's a huge statement. Huge. That doesn't mean I'm ready to put him in the Saints Hall of Fame or
No.
anything like that. But again, there's another player that we thought we were counting on from last year based on how he played last year, and already we're seeing there's a battle right there between Taylor and Adebo to see who is going to be that corner that's going to start out
Hmm.
opposite Lattimore. So yeah, that's the part I think of Saints football that's kind of gotten overlooked with the fire Dennis Allen, Jameis versus Andy, all that stuff. There were a lot of good things that happened in the season. So I'm really looking forward to this top 10 list that John Butler's going to
Yeah.
put together doing this, because I want to talk this off season about the positive things, the things that show this franchise is moving forward, and why this won't be like the Raiders. Even if Dennis Allen sucks, this team isn't going to be the Raiders because, quite frankly, we have too good of players on this team
Hmm.
for a coach. A coach really has to go out of his way to ruin this team. This is not Ditka. Ditka was terrible.
Yeah.
Um, that was obvious in week 5, week 6 of his rookie year as a head coach. Um, Hazlitt lost the team, I think, in 2002. I think the consistency wasn't there, and by 2005 it was out the window. But I don't think Dennis Allen is at that point. I think there's a lot of things we can challenge him on, but I don't think he's that bad. That he is that level, you know. Anyway, Bob, real quick, I know you get ready to go out there and smoke. What you got going on in the Bayou Blitz tonight?
You know what? I reached out to Willie Whitehead because,
Ooh,
as you know, he is, yeah, he's a motivational speaker, and I wanted to get his thoughts on. Willie hasn't confirmed with me yet, so that's still pending. Uh, but I want to get his thoughts on a player's mentality going into a final week of a regular season, without the possibility of a playoff berth, and a player's mentality, given the DeMar Hamlin situation, et cetera. I'm hoping we get Willie because he's such a great talk. Either way, Brendan and I are going to hit on those topics similar to what we did tonight.
mhm.
Break down the Philadelphia game, preview the Carolina game, et cetera. But I'm hoping we get Willie because he's such a fun interview. But I'll keep you guys posted through social media during the day.
Absolutely. If I had to put down a fifth man, all time best fifth man on defensive line, Willie Whitehead would be right there.
Oh, hell yeah.
He really, especially in 2000, 2001, 2002, he was really fun. He
Hmm.
really was. He was just that guy that you're like, who the hell's that 98 causing all
Yeah.
that trouble? And he was a fun player. So I'm looking forward to that. So in the meantime, I know you're ready to go. I tried to wrap it up early. It just doesn't work. We get
We
on a
try.
different topic and we start going. So thank you guys for sticking with us tonight. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more to talk about next week over the last game of the season, postseason in 2 weeks. We'll still have lots of we have Black Monday to go through.
Hmm.
You know, Carolina, that coach is fighting for his job. And if Carolina wins this game, they could take the interim label off. But if they lose it, now we got the Sean Payton sweepstakes to talk about. And here's one more team throwing their name in the hat. Anna asked if we're gonna, you know, what we could get for Sean Payton. We could talk about that next week, but it's no less than a first now. You know, given what's going on in the league, no less than a first. So anyway, thank you guys for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.